Let's just jump right into this explainer, shall we? Today, we are profiling 3 microscopic culprits that have historically wreaked absolute havoc, all through a single tiny insect bite. We're looking at a fascinating and honestly pretty terrifying family of viruses known as Flaviviruses. These pathogens, they've literally shaped human history. They've dictated the outcomes of wars, and they continue to throw massive curveballs at modern medicine. So we're going to break down their unique biological weapons, tracing their paths from the exact moment they breach your skin to the systemic chaos they unleash inside your body. Here's how we're breaking things down today. First, dengue, the breakbone fever. Second, yellow fever, an epic saga. And third, West Nile, the accidental invader.
All right, let's kick things off with part 1, dengue, the breakbone fever.
This is a virus currently found in over 100 countries, and, it acts like a biological booby trap just waiting to be sprung. But to really grasp dengue, you've got to understand the sheer grueling physical toll it takes. The agony of the muscle and joint pain, it is legendary. The name itself likely comes from the Swahili phrase kadingo pepo, which basically translates to a cramp-like seizure caused by an evil spirit. Think about that for a second. And back in the 1780s, the American physician Benjamin Rush coined this incredibly vivid moniker, breakbone fever. It literally feels as though your bones might snap from the pressure. But clinically speaking, dengue operates in a super unusual way.
So the dengue virus manufactures 10 different proteins. 3 of them make up the outer structure, but the other 7 are non-structural. They're hidden away in the virus's interior. One of these, known as NS1, gets released straight into your bloodstream during an infection, and it has this almost magnetic affinity for your endothelial cells. That's the inner lining of your blood vessels. It just firmly attaches itself right there. Ultimately, this NS1 protein is the primary villain responsible for the most severe dengue reactions.
But here's the wild part. The real danger actually comes from a second infection. Picture this. You get infected for the first time, let's say with dengue type 1. You usually just get mild symptoms. Your body clears it out, and you make antibodies for the type 1 core and that NS1 protein we just talked about. But what happens if, a few years down the line, you get infected again, but this time with dengue type 2? Well, your old type 1 antibodies don't recognize the new type 2 core, but they perfectly recognize the NS1 protein because that one is identical across all the strains. So your immune system is completely locked and loaded. It sees these massive amounts of NS1 attached to your blood vessel walls and just launches an all-out assault. This friendly fire essentially degrades the integrity of your blood vessels, causing them to literally leak. And bam, that's the booby trap.
Now, dengue couldn't pull this whole operation off without its partner in crime. The virus relies heavily on a specific mosquito, Aedes aegypti. And this little guy is particularly troublesome because it feeds during the day, right where we live. Essentially, it's the world's absolute worst uninvited houseguest. Unlike other mosquitoes that breed in remote swamps and only bite at night, Aedes is fully domesticated. It loves human environments. It'll happily breed in old tires or a forgotten flower pot in your backyard. And because it's an active daytime feeder, our everyday exposure risk completely skyrockets.
Moving right along to part 2, yellow fever, an epic saga.
So this is a flavivirus that originated in Africa and literally crossed the globe on sailing ships, becoming one of medical history's most epic and tragic sagas. Unlike dengue, yellow fever doesn't wait around for a second strike to cause severe damage. When it enters your system, it hits like a proverbial ton of bricks on day 1. You don't need to be primed by any previous infection. The chills, the rigors, the relentless nausea, it immobilizes patients for days, right out of the gate.
And the name? Well, it stems from the intense jaundice that most patients display, which tragically led to about half of severely affected patients dying. The liver damage causes a deep yellowing of the skin and eyes. It was actually such a feared maritime killer that ships arriving from infected areas were legally forced to fly a yellow flag, famously known as a yellow jack, just to warn the port. In fact, the entire genus we're talking about today, Flavivirus, gets its name from flavus, which is the Latin word for yellow.
For centuries, people honestly thought it was spread by infected blankets or clothing. Even into the 1880s, top scientists were totally convinced it had to be a bacteria, completely missing the microscopic virus. It wasn't until 1898 that Army Dr. Walter Reed, who was investigating a massive outbreak at a U.S. garrison in Cuba, finally proved mosquitoes were the vector. He often relied on brave human volunteers who actually let themselves be bitten, and tragically, some of them died. Finally, in the late 1930s, Max Thieler at the Rockefeller Institute got the breakthrough we needed. By passing the virus through mouse brains, he developed an attenuated or weakened strain. That exact 17D vaccine has saved millions upon millions of lives since. Let's zoom into the microscopic level for a second. Yellow fever primarily targets the liver, setting off massive systemic inflammation. When that mosquito bites you, your own immune cells, specifically the macrophages, accidentally act as a tiny taxi service. They transport the virus straight to your lymph nodes. From there, it hitches a ride into the bloodstream on your lymphocytes. Its unique surface proteins allow it to latch onto several different types of cells, but it has this really devastating preference for liver cells. Once there, it replicates wildly, causing rapid cell death and triggering a massive, system-wide inflammatory response known as a cytokine storm.
Now remember how dengue uses the NS1 protein to cause vessel leakage? Well, yellow fever utilizes a different weapon, the NS5 protein. It uses this to suppress our natural immune defenses and massively amplify its attack. Think of interferons as essentially your body's early alarm system, warning all the surrounding cells of a viral invasion. Well, NS5 comes in and literally cuts the wire to that alarm system. This protein is actually present in all flaviviruses, but its specific role in the extreme, rapid virulence of yellow fever is a huge part of why the disease is so incredibly lethal upon the very first exposure.
Okay, moving to part 3, West Nile, the accidental invader. Back in 1999, why were birds suddenly falling from the sky in New York? This cinematic and, frankly, alarming event at the Bronx Zoo introduced the United States to a pathogen that was previously thought to be just a minor issue isolated in remote parts of Africa. Just imagine being in New York in '99. One day, a bird drops out of the sky, dead. Then another. Then reports start flooding in from the Bronx Zoo that their captive birds are mysteriously dying. Initially, public reaction was just sort of a benign ambivalence, right? Like, sad for the birds, but seemingly no threat to us humans. But laboratory testing soon revealed the culprit. West Nile virus, a pathogen that most scientists had brushed off as a nondescript minor virus from half a world away.
While it primarily targets birds, the severity of a West Nile outbreak in any given area depends on a really specific combination of factors aligning perfectly. First, you need the right vector, specifically mosquitoes from the genus Culex that are actually willing to bite both birds and humans. Then you need a high density of infected birds acting as a reservoir. Add in a potent strain of the virus, and finally favorable environmental conditions that allow the mosquito population to absolutely boom. When all those stars align, that is when the virus jumps.
But here is the truly fascinating twist. While we can be accidentally infected, these microscopic invaders essentially hit a brick wall inside of us. They're unable to use us to spread any further. You see, West Nile desperately wants to be inside a bird. When it ends up in a human, or even a horse for that matter, we just don't produce enough virus particles, or virions, in our blood. So if an uninfected mosquito comes along and bites an infected human, it just gets a normal blood meal, not a mouthful of virus. We are, quite literally, a biological dead end for West Nile.
The way it gets in is incredibly stealthy. Mosquito saliva actually suppresses our skin's sentinels, allowing the virus a clear path straight to the brain. Normally, our skin is this incredible physical and immunological barrier, but the Culex mosquito saliva literally reduces the activity of our mast cells, our local immune responders. It just completely dampens the alarm. The virus then slips right into dendritic macrophages, replicates inside the lymphoid tissue, and boards the lymphocytes. And in the really severe cases, these lymphocytes carry the virus right across the blood-brain barrier, directly into your central nervous system.
Now, even though it's often completely asymptomatic and totally free of the hemorrhagic fevers we see in dengue, the West Nile virus can occasionally cause devastating, long-lasting neurological damage. Because it breaches the central nervous system, patients can display horrific symptoms that mimic Parkinson's disease, polio, or even severe meningitis. Recovery from this can take weeks, and for some folks, the neurological signs are permanent. It is definitely worth noting, however, that most healthy individuals infected with West Nile show very few symptoms. The severe devastation is usually reserved for the elderly or those who already have a compromised immune system.
Finally, let's look at part 4, the rogues gallery, synthesized.
When we pull back and look at their unique strategies, it is just wild to see how a single viral family adapted 3 completely different biological weapons. We've got dengue, the booby trap, manipulating our own immune memory against us through that NS1 protein. We have yellow fever, the sledgehammer, targeting the liver on day 1 and suppressing our alarms with the NS5 protein. And finally, we have West Nile, the accidental invader, a pathogen really meant for birds that occasionally bypasses our blood-brain barrier. 3 viruses, 3 entirely different ways of causing human suffering.
And, looking at all this, it really makes you wonder.
Given how cleverly dengue, yellow fever, and West Nile have adapted their proteins to exploit our biology, what undiscovered microscopic rogue might the next mosquito bite introduce to the world? As our environments continue to change and overlap, what unseen pathogens are currently just waiting in the wings for their own epic saga to begin? We've mapped out the strategies of these three today, but there are over 60 known flaviviruses out there. With global travel, shifting climates, and constantly expanding mosquito habitats, the ultimate question really isn't if we will encounter another microscopic rogue, but simply when. So keep questioning, keep learning, and as always, pay close attention to what's right there under the microscope.